James Jim Grant, a 35-year-old tech entrepreneur, lives in a quiet suburban neighborhood with his wife Susie Grant, a 33-year-old meticulous accountant. They share a seemingly perfect life with their two young children, Ella 6 years old and Max 4 years old. 7 years of marriage, 2 children, and a love that seemed unshakable. But sometimes the cracks appear in the places you least expect. This is the story of how I uncovered the truth about my wife, and how I learned that not all secrets stay hidden. Jim Grant never imagined his life would come to this: a quiet suburban street, a beautiful home, and a seemingly perfect family. He wakes up early every morning to the sound of Susie's soft hums as she prepares for another busy day. Their 2 young children, Ella and Max, are always full of energy, bouncing around, filling the house with laughter. It's the picture of domestic bliss, or at least it used to be. Every morning is a routine breakfast together, packing the kids' lunches, getting them dressed for daycare, and then off they go: Susie to her job as an accountant at a local firm, Jim heading to his office to manage his tech startup. It's the kind of life most people envy: steady, comfortable, and predictable. But lately, something feels off. Jim can't shake the feeling that there's a distance growing between him and Susie. It's not something you can put your finger on, but it's there, like an invisible thread pulling her away from him. They still share the same space, eat meals together, and tuck the kids into bed at night, but there's a quiet emptiness now, a coldness in Susie's gaze. Jim tries to ignore it, convincing himself that she's just stressed with work or the kids' chaotic schedules. But it's becoming harder to deny. There's an unspoken tension between them. It starts with the small things: Susie's distracted phone calls, the way she checks her watch every time they're together, or how she started coming home later than usual. It's the subtle shifts in her routine that no longer align with the woman he married. He wonders if he's just overthinking it. After all, marriage isn't always perfect, right? But the gut feeling won't let go. One night, as they sit on the couch watching TV, Susie seems lost in thought, barely responding when Jim speaks to her. He reaches out to touch her hand, but she pulls away slightly, too quickly, as if startled. It's the smallest thing, but it cuts deeper than it should. Jim knows then that something is wrong. He's always been able to read Susie. She's his wife, the mother of their children, but now, her eyes seem like a million miles away. It's almost as if she's hiding something, and Jim isn't sure whether he wants to know the truth or if he's just too afraid to ask. As the days go by, Jim can't ignore the mounting sense of unease that seems to follow him everywhere. He tries to dismiss it, chalk it up to stress or a bad day, but every time Susie comes home late or disappears into her phone, something inside him clenches. He watches her as she moves about the house, the way her attention drifts when he's talking. It's like she's physically present but mentally elsewhere, and it's a painful realization. He finds himself questioning everything. Did they ever really know each other? Is it just the natural ebb and flow of a long marriage? Or has something changed fundamentally between them? Jim starts paying closer attention to Susie's actions. He catches little moments when she quickly hides her phone screen as he walks into the room, the way she seems overly cautious when he asks about her day. He dismisses these things at first, telling himself that he's imagining things. But deep down, he knows something is off. He notices that Susie has been working late more often. She says it's because of deadlines at work, but Jim can't shake the feeling that she's avoiding him. When they do spend time together, it feels strained, as though there's a wall between them that he can't break down. One evening, after tucking the kids into bed, Jim finds himself sitting alone in the dark, scrolling through his phone. He's not sure why he does it, but he opens Susie's social media profile. It's not something he's ever done before. There's no reason for him to doubt her, at least. That's what he tells himself. But tonight, something compels him to look closer. There, in a photo of her at a work event, is Erin, her colleague from the accounting firm. They're standing close, their smiles too warm, their chemistry too obvious. Jim can't help but feel a surge of discomfort. It's a fleeting moment, just a photo, but it stirs something dark inside him. The realization hits like a ton of bricks. His wife, the woman he thought he knew better than anyone, might be hiding something. The seeds of suspicion have been planted, and there's no going back. As Jim stares at the photo, his heart races. He doesn't know if he's just being paranoid or if this is the beginning of something much worse. But one thing is certain: he can't ignore this feeling anymore. He has to know the truth, whatever it is. And that thought fills him with dread. Because what if he's right? What if the woman he loves is slipping away, and he doesn't even know why? What if she's not the person he thought she was? The next few days feel like a blur to Jim. His mind is constantly racing, consumed by doubt and suspicion. The little things he's noticed now feel like undeniable evidence, like pieces of a puzzle that, when put together, reveal a picture he's not ready to accept. But deep down, he knows he has to confront the truth. The gut feeling he's had, the one that's been gnawing at him for weeks, can't be ignored anymore. That's when Jim decides he's going to find out for sure, even if it means losing a piece of himself in the process. It's a decision he makes in the dead of night, as Susie sleeps beside him, completely unaware of the storm brewing in his mind. Jim knows he can't just ask Susie directly. That would give her a chance to deny it, to lie straight to his face. No, he needs concrete proof, something undeniable. The next morning, he sets his plan into motion. Jim doesn't want to admit it, but the idea of secretly recording Susie feels like the only way to uncover what's really happening. He convinces himself that it's for the greater good, for clarity, for closure. After all, he's doing this for the family, for their future. But the truth is, he's desperate. Desperate for answers. He spends hours researching how to set up discrete cameras. He uses his knowledge of technology to rig a few hidden cameras around the house, placing them where they'll capture key moments of Susie's daily routine. He tells himself he's just documenting life as it happens, as if he's recording memories of their time together. But inside, he knows what he's doing. It's surveillance, and it feels dirty. Every day, Jim comes home from work with a growing sense of dread. He can't help but wonder if Susie knows, if she somehow figured out what he's doing. But each time he checks the footage, he tells himself it's worth it. He watches her as she prepares dinner, interacts with the kids, checks her phone. It feels invasive, but Jim convinces himself it's necessary. The moments are small, insignificant, really, but they build up, each one adding weight to the suspicions he's been carrying. One evening, as he watches the footage from one of the hidden cameras, Jim catches something that makes his stomach drop. He sees Susie talking to Aaron in the kitchen, laughing together, standing too close. There's a moment when they look at each other, a brief but intimate glance that sends a wave of nausea through him. His hand shakes as he rewinds the footage, watching it again. He doesn't want to believe it. He doesn't want to accept that his worst fear is coming true. But in that moment, he knows there's something between Susie and Aaron. It's not just work friends, not just innocent camaraderie. It's something more. The tension between Jim and Susie has been building for weeks, and tonight, it feels unbearable. The cracks in their relationship are starting to show. Jim can no longer pretend that everything is fine. The smallest gestures, the briefest interactions, all feel like signs pointing toward something darker, something he's not ready to face. And then Susie drops the bombshell. She invites Jim to a work party, a seemingly harmless event, a casual get-together with her colleagues. She encourages him to come, saying it'll be fun, a chance to unwind. But Jim can't shake the feeling that something about this invitation is different. The way Susie says it, the way she glances at him when she asks, feels off. He starts to wonder if she's trying to cover her tracks, trying to appear normal, like everything's still fine. Jim hesitates. He could go, he tells himself. But a strange, undeniable urge tells him that he shouldn't. That night he decides to stay home. Maybe it's fear, maybe it's instinct. But he's not ready to face whatever might unfold at that party, especially after what he's seen on the footage. He doesn't want to walk into a room where he might have to see the truth staring him in the face. As Susie gets ready, Jim watches her carefully. She spends an unusual amount of time picking out her outfit, selecting a dress that he's never seen before. It's something she'd never normally wear for a casual event. Jim feels his stomach tighten as he watches her in front of the mirror, carefully applying makeup, making sure every detail is perfect. He wonders who she's dressing up for. And then there's her phone, which she checks repeatedly, texting and smiling at the screen in a way that makes Jim's blood run cold. He can't help but feel a sense of dread settling over him. But he says nothing. He doesn't want to confront her yet, not when he's not even sure what he's dealing with. Instead, he sits in the living room, trying to focus on anything but the growing pit in his stomach. He waits. And waits. Hours pass. Finally, Susie leaves, a soft goodbye as she heads out the door. Jim watches her leave, his mind racing. The party will be over soon, he tells himself. She'll come back, and they'll pretend like everything's normal. But deep down, he knows he's not ready for what might happen when she walks back through that door. What Jim doesn't know is that tonight will change everything. After Susie leaves for the party, the house feels eerily quiet. Jim sits in the living room, his thoughts swirling like a storm. He knows he should relax, enjoy the peace, but all he can think about is what he saw on the footage earlier. He tries to distract himself by flipping through channels, but it's impossible to shake the image of Susie and Aaron, her colleague from the accounting firm, laughing together, standing too close, sharing a moment that felt all too intimate. It's a simple clip, only a few seconds long, but it haunts him. And so, he watches it again, and again. Each time, he hopes he'll see something different, something that will make the discomfort in his chest go away, but it only grows with each viewing. The footage becomes his obsession. Jim finds himself checking it constantly, replaying the same moments over and over, like a man trapped in his own thoughts. He's terrified of what he might find, but at the same time he can't look away. Each time he watches, he picks up on something new, the way Aaron's hand lingers just a little too long when he touches Susie's arm, the way her eyes light up when she looks at him. It's subtle, but there's something that doesn't belong in their seemingly perfect family life. Jim convinces himself that he's just being paranoid, that maybe he's reading too much into it. After all, they work together, right? Maybe it's nothing. But then he remembers the way Susie checked her phone so often, the way she smiled at the screen in a way that felt like a secret. A horrible thought flashes through his mind. What if this isn't just a work friendship? What if this is something more? Something that has been hiding in plain sight, right under his nose. He can't stop himself now. Each time he looks at the footage, the pieces fall into place, the puzzle becoming clearer and clearer. But there's still one thing Jim can't understand: why? Why is Susie doing this? Why has she been pulling away? What is Aaron to her? And most importantly, what does it mean for their family? Jim's heart races as he continues to watch the footage, his mind spinning in a million directions. He's on the edge now, consumed by his need for answers. But what will he do once he has them? Can he handle the truth, or will it destroy everything he's ever known? The tension builds, and Jim knows that no matter what, things will never be the same again. The night drags on, the silence of the house settling deeper into Jim's bones. Time seems to stretch, the minutes dragging by like hours. He can't escape the thoughts running through his mind, the images of Susie with Aaron, her laughter, the way she touched him. Every time Jim tries to push it aside, it comes back stronger, more insistent. He knows deep down that there's something happening that he can't ignore. When the door finally opens, it's almost a shock. Susie steps inside, her eyes bright, her cheeks flushed from the party. There's a strange tension in the air as she greets Jim, her voice just a little too cheerful, as if she's trying to hide something. She says she had a good time, that the event was great, but Jim isn't listening. He's watching her every move, looking for any sign that will confirm his worst fear. Susie seems different tonight. There's a new energy about her, a sharpness in her movements that feels unfamiliar. It's almost as if she's trying to act normal, but Jim can see the cracks in her facade. She's on edge, too. Jim feels his pulse quicken. He knows that this moment, the moment she walks back into their home, is going to change everything. Without thinking, Jim stands up, his voice low but steady. Where's Aaron? The question hangs in the air between them, the tension so thick it's almost suffocating. Susie freezes for a moment, her face unreadable. Then, slowly, she places her keys on the counter and looks up at him. "What do you mean?" she asks, her voice too calm, too careful. "I saw you," Jim says, his voice barely a whisper. "I saw you with him. At the party. You're hiding something, and I need to know what it is." There's a long silence, one that stretches out in painful beats. Susie's expression falters, just for a moment, before she quickly composes herself. But Jim doesn't miss it. That split second of vulnerability. "I don't know what you're talking about," she says, but her voice shakes just slightly. Jim's heart skips a beat. The lie is so thin, so transparent, that it cuts him deeper than any truth could. The floodgates open, and Jim can't stop the torrent of questions pouring out of him. "How long, Susie? How long has this been going on? Is it Aaron? Have you been seeing him behind my back? What else are you hiding?" Susie's face pales as she stares at him, the walls closing in. For the first time in years, Jim feels like he doesn't know his own wife. He watches her struggle for words, her mind clearly racing, trying to come up with a response that will make everything right again. But Jim already knows. The pieces have all fallen into place. The lies, the secrets, the distance. He sees it now. "I can't keep doing this," Susie finally says, her voice breaking. "I didn't want you to find out like this, but I..." Before she can finish, Jim steps forward, his voice shaking with anger and hurt. "But you've been doing this, haven't you? You've been lying to me. All this time." It's the confrontation he's dreaded. The truth he wasn't ready to hear, but it's here now, and there's no going back. The woman he thought he knew, his wife, the mother of their children, has been keeping secrets. And as the weight of those secrets crashes down on him, Jim knows that nothing will ever be the same again. The tension in the room is suffocating as Jim waits for Susie to speak. His chest is tight, his breath shallow, every nerve in his body screaming for answers. He watches her carefully, as if searching for some shred of truth hidden behind the lies she's been weaving. He can see the weight of her guilt in her eyes, the way her hands tremble as she tries to gather the strength to confess. I didn't want to hurt you," Susie begins, her voice cracking. It's a feeble attempt to justify what she's done, but Jim can hear the truth in her words. She never wanted him to find out this way. She never wanted him to know the depth of the betrayal she's been hiding. "Then why?" Susie, Jim's voice is strained, as if the question itself is a burden he's been carrying for far too long. "Why did you do this? What did I do wrong?" Susie takes a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It wasn't you, Jim." "It was. I don't know. Things changed. After Ella and Max were born, everything was different. I felt lost, like I wasn't myself anymore. And then Aaron, he was there. He understood me in ways you couldn't. It started off innocent, but then it became something more." Jim listens in stunned silence, the words crashing over him like waves. The pain of hearing them feels almost unbearable. He wants to scream, to yell at her, but all he can do is stand there, rooted to the spot. How long had she been lying? How long had she been hiding this from him, from their children? "I never meant to fall in love with him, Jim, but I did. And now I don't know what to do. I never wanted to hurt you like this." Susie's words are filled with regret, but they also carry a certain finality, as if there's no going back from where they are now. The weight of her confession crushes Jim. His whole world, the life he thought he knew, the woman he married, the family they built together, feels like it's crumbling in front of him. Everything he thought was solid, real, and unbreakable is nothing more than a fragile illusion. "So you've been seeing him all this time?" Jim's voice is barely above a whisper. His heart aches with the realization that his worst fears were true, that the love he thought they shared was nothing more than a facade. "How long has this been going on, Susie?" "Months," she admits, her face pale. "Since last spring. It wasn't planned. It just happened." The silence that follows feels like an eternity. Jim feels as if the floor has fallen out from under him. His mind is racing, trying to process the betrayal, trying to understand how it could have gone on for so long without him noticing. It's like a sharp, deep cut, and no matter how much he tries to pull away from it, it's still there, bleeding out his trust, his love. As the confession hangs in the air, Jim can't help but feel like his entire life has been shattered into 1,000 pieces. The trust he placed in Susie, the life they built together, it all feels like a lie. And now, as he stands in front of her, listening to her admit the affair, Jim realizes that there's no going back. The truth has been laid bare, and the consequences of Susie's actions will ripple through everything they've known. Jim's anger burns like wildfire in his chest. But it's not just anger, it's betrayal, hurt, and confusion, all wrapped into one devastating emotion. He stares at Susie, trying to hold himself together, trying to make sense of the chaos swirling inside him. She's standing there, her eyes filled with regret, but Jim can't find it in himself to feel sorry for her. Not now. Not after everything she's done. "I want to talk to Aaron," Jim says, his voice cold, steady. He's not sure where this sudden resolve is coming from, but he knows it's what he has to do. He can't just let this go. He needs answers, and if Susie won't give them to him, then Aaron will. "Jim, please," Susie pleads, her voice breaking. "Don't do this. You don't know what you're asking. I didn't want this. I didn't want to hurt you, but now everything is falling apart. If you go to him, it'll make things worse." But Jim's mind is made up. His heart is shattered, his trust destroyed, and all he can think about is confronting the man who's torn his life apart. He's not going to sit here and let Aaron walk away without facing the consequences of his actions. If anyone is going to understand the depth of this betrayal, it's Aaron. "I need to look him in the eye," Jim says, the words coming out with an edge he doesn't recognize in himself. "I need to hear him say it. I need to know why." With that, Jim grabs his coat and storms out the door, leaving Susie behind. The cool night air hits him like a slap, but he doesn't care. All he can think about is Aaron, what he's done to his family, to his wife, to his children. And Jim needs answers, no matter what it takes. He drives in a daze, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turn white. The rage inside him builds with every passing second. He's not sure what he's going to say to Aaron, but he knows he has to confront him. He needs to look this man in the eye, demand the truth, and find out if Aaron feels any remorse for what he's done. When Jim arrives at Aaron's house, he can't help but feel a sense of finality. This is it. The moment where everything changes. The moment where his life and Susie's will be forever altered by the decisions they've both made. He rings the doorbell, and a few moments later, the door opens. Aaron stands there, looking surprised but not guilty, at least not in the way Jim expected. He's caught off guard, but there's a certain arrogance in his posture, a smugness in his eyes. It's almost as if he's already prepared for this moment. "You," Jim spits, his voice barely under control. "You've been sleeping with my wife. You've been tearing my family apart. And now, I want to know why." Aaron looks at Jim, his expression calm, almost too calm, like someone who's been through this kind of confrontation before. His eyes don't show the guilt Jim expected. There's no shame, no remorse. Instead, there's a coldness to him, an unsettling indifference that sends a chill down Jim's spine. This isn't the reaction Jim was hoping for. He wanted to see Aaron squirm, wanted to feel like he was finally holding the man accountable for his actions. But instead, Aaron stands there with an almost amused smile. "You've got it all wrong," Aaron says, his voice smooth, as though he's not surprised by Jim's outburst. "I'm not the problem here. You and Susie, well, you've been living in a fantasy world, haven't you?" The words hit Jim like a slap. He stumbles back, unable to comprehend what Aaron is saying. "What do you mean? You think I'm the problem?" Jim's voice trembles with a mix of disbelief and fury. Aaron steps forward, his tone still calm, almost condescending. "You've been blind, Jim. You never saw it, did you? Susie's been unhappy for years. She didn't know how to say it to you, but I was there. I saw the cracks in your perfect little family, and when she came to me seeking comfort, I gave it to her. She needed someone to listen, to understand." Jim's mind is racing. He wants to yell, to punch Aaron in the face, but he holds himself back, wanting to hear everything. Aaron's words cut deeper than he expected, revealing not just the affair, but the lies he never even considered. Susie wasn't just unfaithful, she had been unhappy for a long time. This wasn't a momentary lapse. It was a slow, burning destruction of everything he thought was solid. "You think I wanted this," Aaron continues, almost with a sneer. "I'm not the villain here. I'm just the guy who came along at the right moment. Don't blame me for your failures, Jim. Blame her. Blame yourself." The words land like a bombshell. Jim's world is crumbling around him. He had thought he was the victim, the betrayed husband. But now, Aaron's words make him question everything he knew about his relationship with Susie. Had he really been so blind? Had he missed the signs of her discontent? Was this all his fault? "Enough," Jim says, his voice strained, barely able to mask the heartbreak. "You don't get to twist this. You don't get to turn my pain into something I deserve. You're a coward, Aaron. A coward who hid behind a woman's vulnerability." Aaron shrugs, as if he couldn't care less. "Maybe I am, but you're just as much to blame. You were too busy with your perfect life to notice the cracks. Now, you have to face the consequences. And Susie, she'll never be the same." The finality in Aaron's words hits Jim harder than anything else. It's not just about the affair anymore. It's about everything that's been lost, the years of their marriage, the family they built, the love that was once so strong. Jim feels a pit in his stomach, knowing that there's no going back from here.